The owner of the company looked me dead in the eye and said, "Get out of my building right now." So I did. I walked out the back door, got in my car, and drove 3.5 hours to the beach. That was a Wednesday. I didn't come back until Monday. By Thursday morning, the phones were ringing constantly. My direct manager needed files. HR needed signatures. A major client presentation was falling apart, and every single piece of it lived on my work profile behind a password I had been explicitly told never to share. I hadn't broken any rule. I'd followed every single instruction to the letter. Sometimes the cleanest moves are the ones nobody sees coming until it's already too late to stop them. This was a sales office, the kind where the air always smelled faintly of cold coffee and competitive anxiety. Commission structures, bonus targets, monthly rankings posted on a whiteboard near the break room. I was in my early 20s, reasonably good at the job, and largely unbothered by the politics of the place, which, looking back, was probably both my greatest strength and the reason I ended up in this situation at all. The floor had maybe 15 associates at any given time. Most of us worked reasonably well together. Then there was Reg. Reg had been in the industry for a long time, longer than most of the managers had been alive, by his own account. He had the kind of seniority that gets quietly confused with competence over the years. Managers who had worked with him at previous companies before landing here still treated him with a deference that bore no relationship to his current performance. And his performance was a problem, not in any dramatic, fireable way, just in the slow, grinding way that made everyone else's job harder. He would intercept customer calls that weren't his. He would let a sale die rather than pass it to a colleague who could close it, especially if a coupon or discount was involved that would reduce his cut. Bonuses were team-structured for a reason, and Reg's habits quietly ensured we rarely hit the thresholds that would have paid all of us more. Nobody higher up connected those dots. Or if they did, they chose not to. I was young. My threshold for absorbing that kind of friction was low. So one afternoon, while Reg was away from his desk, I made a small creative decision. The screensavers in that office were the old scrolling text type, a banner phrase drifting across the monitor on a loop. Most people had something generic. "Have a great day." "Welcome." That kind of thing. I had watched Reg type his password once, not deliberately. He sat 2 cubicles over and had a habit of typing loudly with full arm movements, like he was trying to communicate via semaphore. The password wasn't complicated. I waited until he left, for what I knew would be at least 20 minutes based on his daily pattern. Then I walked over, logged in, opened the screensaver settings, and changed the scrolling text to read, "Reg is a jackass." Then I logged out, walked back to my desk, and went back to work. For the rest of that day, and most of the following one, nothing happened. People would pass his cubicle, glance at the screen, and keep walking with a slightly fixed expression. The ones who caught it would find me later in the break room and say nothing, just raise their eyebrows. It was a small shared thing, harmless in my estimation at the time. Then, mid-afternoon on the second day, I heard it from across the floor. "What is this? What is this? Who did this? This is defamation. Who is responsible for this?" Reg had been sitting at his desk, phone wedged between his ear and shoulder, apparently in full conversation, when the screensaver activated. He read it, then read it again, then stood up. The office did not go silent. It went quiet in that particular way, where everyone is very deliberately focused on their screens, while actually watching everything peripherally. Reg went to the nearest manager's desk. The manager pulled up a chair, looked at the screen, pressed his lips together very hard for a moment, and then told Reg to calm down and take a walk. He changed the screensaver text while Reg watched. Then they left together down the corridor. I assumed that was the end of it. I went back to a client call. About 90 minutes later, one of the floor supervisors appeared at my desk and said, "Mr. Aldworth wanted to see me upstairs." That wasn't unusual. The owner called associates up regularly for client matters, project reviews, occasional check-ins. I didn't think anything of it. I walked into his office, and he didn't let me sit down. "What the hell were you thinking? Do you understand what you've just done? That man has litigation history. 2 separate companies. Do you know what it costs to defend a workplace harassment claim even when you win? You use someone else's login credentials, which is a policy violation regardless of what the rest of you have normalized on that floor. Password sharing is explicitly prohibited. It is in your contract." I started to explain that it had been a joke, that sharing credentials was common practice among the team to pull shared reports and client files, that nobody had ever treated it as a serious issue. He cut me off. "It is on the security footage. You at his terminal. That is the end of this conversation. You are suspended for 3 days, effective immediately. Leave this office. Leave this building. Right now." So I did exactly that. I went out the back stairwell, walked to my car, and drove away. It was not quite noon on a Wednesday. I called my wife from the car. I told her I had a 5-day weekend starting immediately. She said, "What happened?" I said, "I'll explain on the way." I told her we should drive to the coast. There was a stretch of beach about 3.5 hours south that we'd been meaning to visit for most of that summer. We were packed and on the road before 2 o'clock. About an hour in, my phone started ringing. I let it go. Back then, mobile minutes were a genuine financial consideration, not an abstract formality. The calls kept coming. My wife, after the fourth or fifth time, said I should probably answer. I picked up. It was someone from HR. She said she needed me to come back and sign the suspension paperwork before I left. I told her I had been instructed to leave the building immediately. I told her I was already over an hour out of town. I told her I was happy to sign whatever was needed when I returned on Monday. She was not pleased. But there was nothing she could do with that information. Then my direct manager called. He needed the client presentation files. A significant prospect was coming in, and all the prepared materials were stored on my profile, the work I had been leading for the past 6 weeks. I told him what had happened. He said nobody had informed him. He asked me to come back and hand over the files. I said I had been told to leave the building immediately and not to share passwords. I said I was already out of town. I said I wasn't turning around. He asked for my login credentials. I reminded him of what Mr. Aldworth had said, specifically and on camera, about password sharing being a policy violation. I told him I was about to lose signal through the coastal hills and had to go. I turned the phone off. Not airplane mode, not silent. Off. The kind of off that was just off. We spent 3 days on the coast. The weather held. We found a place that did good breakfast until noon and a decent seafood counter that opened at 4. We walked a lot. We slept well. My wife thought the whole thing was either very funny or very stupid depending on the hour of the day. I didn't check messages until Sunday afternoon, sitting in the car park of a petrol station about 40 minutes from home, windows down, engine off. There were 11 voicemails. The first few were my direct manager, increasingly terse, asking me to make contact and provide the files or the login details. One of them floated the suggestion that perhaps the 3-day suspension hadn't been meant literally, that Mr. Aldworth might not have fully accounted for the active project workload. Then there was one from later in the week, where my manager said Mr. Aldworth was now aware that there were ongoing client projects I had been leading and would like me to come back early if possible. Then another saying that Mr. Aldworth had decided to make an exception to the password policy just this once, and that I was welcome to share my credentials with my direct manager to allow the work to continue. I sat with that for a moment. The man who had told me, in no uncertain terms, that password sharing was a terminable policy violation, was now leaving voicemails asking me to please share my password. I drove home, got a reasonable night's sleep, and arrived at work at my normal time on Monday morning. My manager came to find me within 10 minutes. He wanted the files. I pulled them up, walked him through the presentation structure, sent over the relevant reports, and flagged 3 things in the client brief that the stand-in materials had apparently missed. He didn't say much. He looked like a man who had eaten something slightly wrong and was trying to be polite about it. Mr. Aldworth passed me in the corridor around mid-morning. He didn't stop. He gave me a look that was almost impossible to classify. Not angry, not warm. Somewhere in the register of someone recalibrating a prior assessment. He kept walking. Reg was at his desk when I came back onto the floor. He looked at me. I sat down, put on my headset, and made a sale before 11. In sales, a fresh number on the board has a way of making previous conversations feel remarkably distant. That's just the culture of the work. I understood it. I had always understood it, and I had returned on Monday with exactly the leverage the culture provided. I never found out what happened to the client presentation. Either they made the deal, or they didn't, or they rescheduled. It stopped being my problem around the time I crossed the county line on Wednesday afternoon. Reg stayed on the floor for another several months after that. His habits didn't change. His relationship with management didn't change either, not in any visible way. But there was a slight shift in how seriously his complaints were received. The thing about a man who escalates a screensaver to the owner's office and then watches the owner send someone home for 3 days, only to spend those 3 days frantically trying to recall that decision. It quietly reframes how people weigh that man's judgment going forward. I didn't set out for any of that. I changed the screensaver because I was 20-something, and Reg was irritating, and I thought it would be funny. And it was funny. It was very funny. What I hadn't planned was that the response to it would hand me a 5-day break from a company that offered almost no paid time off, establish that I was holding critical project knowledge with no documented backup, and demonstrate in real time that the rules only applied when enforcing them was convenient. I simply paid attention to what I was told and acted accordingly. I've thought about that week occasionally over the years, not with any particular pride or regret. It was a young person's move that landed better than it deserved to, largely because the people reacting to it made worse decisions than I did. That's most of how these things go. You don't need to be clever. You just need to be paying attention when someone in authority hands you the map to their own contradiction. The most powerful position you can be in is one where you're simply doing exactly what you were told,